What's going on, guys? Welcome to the video. The BBC host Andrew Neil has absolutely destroyed Labour MP Andy McDonald over incorrect figures relating to the NHS and medicine purchases made by and for the NHS. Of course, Labour have been running around saying that any Boris Johnson trade deal with America will cost the NHS £500 billion more because of reasons, I guess. Maybe they got Diane Abbott to do the maths, because not only is what the Labour MP said completely ridiculous, but Andrew Neil, it seems, has actually done some research. Which takes us to this article talking about it, which we will quickly go over before we look at the video that this article is discussing. So let's check it out. The headlines: Andrew Neil humiliates Labour MP over incorrect figures. Well, I've done my homework. Labour MP Andy McDonald was savaged by BBC's Andrew Neil on Wednesday evening as he tore apart the argument the Conservatives want to sell the NHS. Of course, as we all know by now, this is Labour's main election campaigning tool. They're going to try and use the NHS and act like Boris plans to sell it to the Americans for some unknown reason. The Shadow Transport Minister argued Prime Minister Boris Johnson is walking into the arms of Donald Trump. Of course, Trump derangement syndrome. It doesn't take very long for Labour to come out with that when it comes to a trade deal. It comes as Labour has warned it would cost the UK government $500 billion to buy medicines for the NHS. Mr Neil said Jeremy Corbyn has said the figures are both credible and accurate. But Dr Hill himself said it's a crude estimate and the exact money is difficult to predict. Dr Hill, by the way, guys, is the person who made the report that Jeremy Corbyn and Andy McDonald are trying to cite. He himself said it's crude estimates and the exact money is difficult to predict. Now, the rest of the article just talks about what is actually said in the interview. So rather than me talking about it, let's actually watch what was said from a few clips during the interview and then we can go over them.
A week could be taken out of the NHS and handed to big drug companies under Boris Johnson's plans for a sellout trade deal with Donald Trump. What's the basis of that figure? Well, let's look in more detail at this, because it seems to be based on a report by Dr. Andrew Hill. He's an advisor to the World Health Organization. Jeremy Corbyn has said that the figures are, quote, credible and accurate. But Dr. Hill himself said it's, quote, a crude estimate and the actual money is difficult to predict. Who's right?
Well, I'm sure it's difficult to predict precisely, but it gives you a very good indication of the intentions of the United States in a free trade agreement, and Boris Johnson is simply wanting to walk into the arms of Donald Trump and allow our NHS to sustain swinging fees from the pharma industry in the United States. And if that goes up from 18 billion to 45 billion, that's a third of the NHS budget, and that's just not sustainable for us.
The figure's ridiculous. The English NHS drugs bill at the moment is £18 billion a year. Why would any British government agree to a deal that would add another 26 billion? I mean, it's ludicrous.
You're right. You do wonder, Andrew, what on earth is going on in the mind of Boris Johnson.
Well, but it's not going on in his mind.
And
no government would agree to a £26 billion rise in our drugs bill. No government. My interest is to try and establish the veracity of this £500 million a week. The figure is based on the UK paying American prices for all the drugs the NHS uses. Drugs produced here, drugs coming from Europe or from Asia, or from all. Why would UK drugs and drugs from non-US sources go to American prices?
Well, you heard it on that documentary I watched.
No, I didn't.
You watched it. You heard this. Oh, sorry?
No, I didn't. I didn't hear why all British drug prices would go to American levels.
Watch the documentary. Watch the documentary.
It didn't claim that all British drug prices would go to American levels. What percentage of the drugs we use are imported from the United States?
I don't know, Andrew. You've got it written down in front of you.
So, I've got it because I've done my homework. It's under 10%. It's under 10%. So even if the UK government was foolish enough to agree to a rise in US drug prices, the extra cost would be 50 million, not 500 million.
Well,
I mean, you put this 500 million figure on the side of a bus, which, as I say, assumes that all our drug prices would go to American levels. It's a ridiculous assumption. But it's probably a good idea because it's about as accurate as the 350 million on the Leave campaign bus, isn't it, during the referendum? Indeed, it's even less accurate. It's even more of a fantasy figure than Boris Johnson's 350 million.
Now, that interview was actually around 10 or 12 minutes long in total. I cut out most of what Andy McDonald said because essentially throughout the whole thing he gives the same answer over and over again. So including what he had to say once was more than enough. He is just relying on these figures because at the end of the day, that's all they've got. The NHS. They know Labour can't say anything about Brexit because obviously they flip-flopped on Brexit and are still currently flip-flopping now. They want a second referendum, they want to negotiate a new deal, which the EU said actually won't happen already, the same as an extension for a referendum. Currently that's not going to happen. But I did leave in every single bit where Andrew Neil was absolutely destroying the stupidity of this £500 billion a year claim. I mean, you would think if Labour are actually campaigning on this NHS £500 billion extra spending that's going to be needed if we have a trade deal with the US, you think they would actually have some evidence and send this pillock onto the show with a bit of evidence to back up what he's saying, not just what he heard on a TV programme. So is this what politicians do now? They base everything around a TV programme. The TV programme said this is correct, so therefore it must be the case. That is essentially what Andy McDonald is angling for here. The TV programme said it, therefore it must be true. Even though the person who did the report said it's highly speculative, with no way of actually knowing how much it will cost. But like Andrew Neil said, we are not going to take 90% of our drugs and increase the prices and be happy with that, with a government allowing it to happen, just because we've got a trade deal with the US, acting like we're not going to trade with any other country in the world, acting like we're not going to make our own drugs and keep them at current prices. We're just going to up them because of reasons. When in actual fact, I'm sure we would outright refuse to buy any of the drugs we currently produce here, so prices would remain the same for them. And I'm sure while we would get some more drugs from the US, it wouldn't be an astonishing amount because at the end of the day, there's many other places to get from. So we wouldn't be paying massive money from ones from the US as we can get most other drugs from other places. Yes, some US drugs that are mainly or only made there might cost us a bit more, but I expect we already get them anyway. A trade deal opens up the possibility of having drugs over here that they have in America that we currently don't have that could save lives. Usually Labour would want these sort of things, but in an election against Boris, I guess not. Everything is just Trump derangement syndrome, literally with these people. Boris and Trump derangement syndrome, swiftly followed by Brexit derangement syndrome. I mean, you hear Andy McDonald trying to say to Andrew Neil that you heard on the documentary it say that this is the case, but in fact, Andrew Neil did not hear that because it likely never happened. Now, personally, I haven't seen this documentary, and by the sounds of what Andrew Neil is saying, I don't really need to, because it's all just speculation. Likely more Project Fear nonsense, which is exactly why the Labour Party and Andy McDonald are using it. But you could hear Andrew Neil saying, I did not hear in the documentary why all British drug prices would go to that of the Americans, because of course, it's nonsense, it never happened. It also leads on to the fact that the Labour MP doesn't even know what percentage of drugs are even imported from the US as it stands at the moment, which Andrew Neil rightly tells him it's less than 10%. We don't actually get that much from there as it stands. So the chances of any government willingly upping the price on 90% of them to match the prices in America is just insane. It's never going to happen, as Andrew Neil said. With extra costs of only 50 million, not the £500 million a week that they are talking about. So, once again, complete nonsense, absolutely destroyed by Andrew Neil. And then to finish up that clip, I added on the little bit at the end where Andrew Neil tears apart this Ramoning tit for his bus stunt. You know, after all these years of complaining about Boris Johnson's £350 million on the side of a bus, these idiots decide it's a good idea to stick "We'll send Trump £500 million a week, let's fund US drug firms, not our NHS." I mean, have they all forgotten that they've run around for the past, I don't know how many months or years, screaming about Boris Johnson's bus stunt and how misleading it was, when you heard Andrew Neil say their £500 million a week on the side of a bus is far more fantastical than the Boris Johnson £350 million a week on the side of a bus. So after criticising Johnson since the 2016 referendum, they decided to go one better and think, yep, no, it's okay for us to do it. Everyone might have forgotten that we were moaning about that only weeks ago in the Common, like a bunch of idiots. I mean, it either goes to show how out of touch with reality the Labour Party are, or just how stupid they are. It's one or the other. You're either out of touch or you're a complete idiot. I'm not sure which one, it could be a combination of the two. But in summing up, Andrew Neil absolutely destroyed this stupid claim by the Labour Party about £500 million a week in the event of a trade deal with the United States and Donald Trump. Because like I said before, the Labour Party has severe Trump, Boris and Brexit derangement syndrome while being led by a bunch of incompetent morons who don't know their arsehole from their ear roll. I mean, to throw up contradictory £500 million a week on the side of a bus after complaining about Boris is an amazing level of stupidity and hypocrisy if you ask me. But this is something we've come to expect from the Remoaners in 2019. I still wonder why Labour send these idiot MPs on there though. It's like none of them have got a clue, none of them bother to do any research beforehand, they just arrive on there and try and wing it through, carrying on answering the same question over and over again with the exact same answer that doesn't answer the question. It just makes you look like an idiot. To be honest, I didn't even really need to talk about it after the clips because at the end of the day, Andy McDonald makes himself look like an idiot. Now, before I go, I want to thank the channel's PayPal, Patreon and Subscribe-Star members for supporting the channel, along with everyone who watches my videos. Remember to let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Leave a like, subscribe with a notification bell and share this video as it helps the channel a lot. And I'll see you all in the next one.
This Parliament is a dead Parliament. It should no longer sit. It has no moral right to sit on these green benches. They don't like the truth. Twice they have been asked to let the electorate decide upon whether they should continue to sit in their seats while they block 17.4 million people's votes. This Parliament is a disgrace. But they're too cowardly to give it a go. But the time is coming. The time is coming, Mr. Speaker, when even these turkeys won't be able to prevent Christmas.